race for the White House. I'm Akanksha Swaroop and we are coming live to you from the CNN studios in New York City. Donald Trump has made a comeback to the White House. That is the big story that not just the United States, but the world over is discussing. It's in fact touted as a greatest comeback by many of the world leaders. With this victory, Donald Trump has achieved several historical firsts. What are they? It includes making him only the second president to be winning non-consecutive terms. Donald Trump has won at least 4 swing states, managing to bring down the blue wall, which was Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. In his victory speech, Donald Trump has indicated one of the major policy decisions. What is that? That he will make and he will in fact end all the wars around the world, and that he will be working to end these global conflicts. Does that mean we will see sweeping changes in the American policy? Ukraine and Israel are on the edge and looking forward to what Donald Trump's stance could be. Will we see the United States now ending aid to Ukraine as many experts are predicting? Or will we also see him bring Israel to the talking table to end the conflict in West Asia? Also, not to forget what Donald Trump will mean for the strategic partnership between New Delhi and Washington, D.C. We'll be decoding all of that in just a bit.
America has given us an unprecedented and powerful mandate. America's future will be bigger, better, bolder, richer, safer, and stronger than it has ever been before. By all putting America first, we have to put our country first. They said, he will start a war. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars. For a reason tonight.
All right, and with that, let me introduce my esteemed panelists. I'm joined in by Walter K. Anderson, who's an American academic. I'm also joined in by Ms. Lisa Curtis, who's a senior fellow and director of the Indo-Pacific Security Program at CNAS. Also joined in by Corinne Clark, who's a Republican strategist. Let me quickly begin with you, Corinne. Over all these years that we've been connecting, we've been talking about how everything will shape up and how will it culminate to this day. As a woman Republican supporter, how do you see this entire election panning out? Is this just an anti-incumbency vote in favor of Donald Trump? Or should we say that the women voters, which were expected to be a differentiating factor in the U.S. presidential election of 2024, have also supported Donald Trump?
I think that this is a mandate for Donald Trump, and I do think a lot of women voted for him. I have said all along, I think we're underestimating the woman vote, especially the mom vote. I think that we saw those early numbers come out with a record high turnout. We were hearing it that women were going to break so hard for Kamala, and what we saw is that really might not have happened in the way that we thought. We'll see those breakdowns a little more throughout the week, but I don't think that this is a fluke. I don't think it's an anti-incumbency vote. I think this is a mandate for Trump. And those of us who supported him all along know that we knew this was going to happen. I think that President Trump connects with people in a way that the establishment in both parties really underestimated. And we saw the victory come through last night. I think he turned out a lot of new voters, a lot of women voters. He won more minority voters than any other Republican, more Black voters than any other Republican. And I think it's a great sign for the future of the GOP. It's a great sign for Trump.
All right, Walter Anderson, if I could bring you in, when they say that this is, also making history when Donald Trump becomes the only second American president to win a non-consecutive second term, what does this mean in terms of how this election has shaped up?
Well, one thing it shows is something of a transformation in American politics. You have Republicans now relied on the working class voter in ways that wasn't the case before. I just saw a report that in the wealthiest districts in the U.S., the Democrats predominated. So you have the Democrats, in a sense, moving into the role that Republicans once played, at least in terms of economic background, and the Democrats and the Republicans, increasingly getting the support of the working class, and including, as the previous speaker just mentioned, an unprecedented Latino vote. Could be as high as 45 to 50%. And that's really quite incredible. And that, if that persists, that will change to a certain extent, the sort of shape of American politics. The Jewish vote is interesting in that, Trump received an unprecedented Jewish vote, particularly in places that count, like New York State. But he also received more Muslim votes than, that has been the case in the past. So you see something of a transformation yesterday in the American political system. And if I look a little groggy, it's because I was up all night watching this election. I'm sure Lisa Curtis may be in the same situation as I am. And that, I hope I stay coherent, since, it was something quite exciting for those of us who are interested in American politics, that this sort of thing happened.
All right. It's
Now,
interesting that you bring out that point. But Lisa, if I could bring you in on the aspect that, many have been talking about this entire presidential election being a battle between, democracy and economy. Is today's result a testament to Americans opting for what's best for the American economy?
Well, I think that has played a large part. Let me first just say this is an amazing mandate for President Trump. This is a huge win for him. I think we haven't talked about the fact that he massively won the popular vote as well. So there's no doubt that the American people have spoken,
Yes.
and they have made their wishes clear. And I think that it was partly about the economy. I think some of the exit polls that they did indicated that. I think 35%, that was the most important thing to Americans. I think that was part of it. Part of it was they want change, and I think they saw in President-elect Trump, I guess we should say, that a strong leader, somebody who might help in calming the waters on the international stage. There's a lot happening: the war in Ukraine, the Middle East, the challenges from China. And I think they just generally felt safer having President Trump at the helm. So I think, it was economy, but I also think it was just this general feeling of President Trump would fight harder for their interests, for what was important to them.
All right. Chris Pennella, who's a defense reporter with Business Insider, is also joining me right now. Chris, how do you weigh in when Donald Trump, right at the time of claiming victory, says that he will be putting an end to the wars? Is it going to be as simple? We know that there's much to his credit, especially if we look back at the way he facilitated the Abraham Accords. But will ending the war, not just in Ukraine, but particularly the one that's ensuing in Gaza and spilling over all the way to Lebanon, and the tricky dynamics with Iran, will he be able to sort of come down on the promise that he's made even during the campaigning?
I think it's going to be difficult. Trump has made repeated and varied claims on the war in Ukraine, how he would handle that conflict. He has said in the past, especially during this campaign, that he would be able to negotiate a deal between Zelensky and Putin, that he could end the war in 24 hours. And experts and analysts have suggested that that's going to be difficult, if not impossible, for Trump to get Zelensky and Putin to find overlap in their desired outcomes to end the war. Both sides have very different objectives in the conflict right now.
All right, we seem to have lost connection with Chris, but we'll try and reconnect. But let me quickly go back to Corinne. Corinne, I think important to also talk about those issues which perhaps the exit polls and the polls throughout have missed out on, because look at the mandate with which he's in fact winning this election, and goes on to say that there are certain issues that have worked in favor of the grand old party and Donald Trump, something that perhaps despite the door-to-door campaigning of Kamala Harris, the Democrats could not achieve.
Yeah, well, I think the exit polls will show us that the polling in general has underestimated the Trump vote. I think a lot of Trump supporters really expected that. Anyone who's been along for the ride in 2016 and 2020 knows Trump outperformed all of the polls in 2016. He outperformed them in 2020 despite not securing the victory. I think we expected him to outperform the polls. He definitely did that by a lot higher margin than we were expecting. And I think that is partly because Kamala was not really running on the issues. I think the Democrat Party was running on the idea that they were not Donald Trump, and they were completely failing to connect with people on the issues that matter. They were not delivering an economic plan. They have no plan for the border, and they're weak on security. I think anyone who lived through the last 4 years thought we're less safe, we're making less money, our money is worth less, and our standing in the world is less respected than it was under Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has a plan for a strong border. He has a plan for a strong economy, and he has a hopeful vision for America rather than just this hateful one towards Trump, which is what the Democrats had to offer. But I think they failed to talk completely, and Donald Trump did what he does best, which is connect with the average American voter and offer them something real for the future.
Lisa, you've often said that as far as the bilateral relationship between New Delhi and Washington is concerned, it's managed to only grow, whether it is the Democrats or the Republicans. We have a bipartisan support. But how do you see this now shaping up under a second presidency of Donald Trump compared to the one we saw back in the year 2019? Many are talking about the camaraderie that Donald Trump shares with the Indian Prime Minister Modi. But would it just be not simplifying it by just referring to that chemistry? Because let's not forget that that presidency and the geopolitical challenges of that presidency are far more different compared to what we are seeing now.
Well, thank you. Well, having served for 4 years in the Trump White House as Deputy Assistant President and Senior Director for South and Central Asia in the White House, in the White House NSC, I definitely witnessed an elevation of the relationship between the U.S. and India. There was, a wonderful friendship between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi. They met on several occasions. They talked on the phone on several occasions. And let's just look at the record, the kinds of things that happened during the Trump presidency. Technology controls were lifted on India. India gained access to armed drones, the first non-NATO ally to be able to accomplish that. The U.S. supported India during the India-China border crisis in 2020. Trump had an excellent visit to India in February 2020. There was support during the COVID crisis, almost weekly phone calls between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi to cooperate during this crisis. So I think that we can expect that President Trump would, pick up where he left off with India, with Prime Minister Modi, and we would see the relationship really, continue to bloom and continue to serve that purpose of helping to stabilize the Indo-Pacific region. Look, the Indo-Pacific region, the China challenge has only gotten worse since President Trump left office in 2020. So, he is going to have a strategy to deal with that. And I think what we'll see, is India will be part of that very important strategy to manage competition with China and be able to, continue to shape a world order that, is in favor of freedom and prosperity. And India will be an important part of that under a Trump administration. So I have very high hopes for the U.S.-India relationship moving forward.
Right.
And I think that we can expect that.
Absolutely. And Lisa, I'm sure that, as far as strategic concerns for both the countries are concerned, China happens to be there, but India's strategic concerns have also increased, especially the one coming in from Canada. I'm going to be weighing in on that as well in just a bit. But let me quickly go across to CNN's Ivan Rodriguez, who's also joining us live right now. Many thanks to you, Ivan, for joining in. Now that Donald Trump is back in the White House and he's laid out his plans vis-a-vis the wars, immigration and the border, are we also expecting to see sweeping changes in U.S. policy under a Trump presidency?
Akanksha, right now, it's still sort of unknown exactly what we can expect from this second Trump presidency. What we know for a fact is that it's not going to look anything like the first time around. Several analysts have pointed to the fact that the first time around, for example, there were still many people within that Trump White House, whether it be chief of staffs, generals surrounding him, that could still provide some sort of unbiased advice. Now, Trump has really surrounded himself over the last couple of years with people who are closer to him, people who really do support him. One interesting point, though, here, Akanksha, is Trump has skirted the conventional transition process and refused to sign ethics agreements that would allow the campaign to begin working with the Biden administration up to 6 months out from the election. So that holdup really does stem from Trump's distrust with federal agencies. So that's just one glimpse that we're getting here as to what that future might look like. Another thing in the balance might be the support for Ukraine and the war against Russia. Could we begin to see troops withdraw from Ukraine? At this point, it's too early to tell, but on the campaign trail, both Trump and J.D. Vance have pointed to the fact that they probably would like to see lesser presence there for sure, the amount of money that's been spent and given in aid to the Ukraine.
All right. Also, will Donald Trump see a complete sweep in battleground states? If yes, how do you think Donald Trump is managing to win or sweep these key battleground states?
When we look at the main things that he ran on, at least with the campaign, really wanted him to focus on, the key issues were the economy, focusing on higher prices, higher gasoline, higher prices at the grocery stores, housing, immigration, the border, and then tying all that together. Those were the key issues that a lot of voters had going to the polls. So when you do look at those key battleground states that you mentioned, you look at that blue wall that we always talk about, that's key for the Democrats, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Trump able to win now 2 of those for sure. Michigan is still not projected yet, but winning in Wisconsin, winning in Pennsylvania, leading in Michigan, and this was always billed as that clear path to victory for Vice President Kamala Harris. Not only that, but he was also able to win again in Georgia, the state that he lost by about 11,000 votes to President Biden in 2020, regaining North Carolina, his narrowest win back in 2020. And at this point, Akanksha, he's still leading in Arizona and Nevada as well. So really a sweeping victory for him on the Electoral College side, also on the popular vote side. 51% of the popular vote at this point is his.
And that does make it a sweeping victory, especially if he also manages to sweep Nevada and Arizona. That means all 7 swing states going in his favor as well. But Ivan, Republicans have gained control of the Senate after 4 years. Could this also make Donald Trump's presidency even more powerful?
It could. And now that we know that the Senate will be under GOP control, all eyes now are on what happens with the House. At this point, we're still waiting to see those results come in. Former President Trump, again now President-elect, celebrated the fact that the GOP was able to regain the Senate. Certainly, it is going to be very much on his mind and hoping that Republicans are able to also regain the House for him to pretty much be able to have a full control there of the government.
All right. Many thanks to you for joining in, Ivan, with all those insights. It was a pleasure speaking to you. On that note, let me quickly go back to Walter. Walter, we also heard about Donald Trump's skepticism, especially towards federal agents. Having said that, how do you see Donald Trump now approaching these various conflicts, especially the one in Ukraine? I'd like your thoughts on, because he's also somebody who's been extremely skeptical about military alliances. He's talked about how he will be doing away with funding to NATO. And so what happens to the relationship that United States shares with NATO and, of course, subsequently the war in Ukraine?
Well, I think a couple things you have to take in consideration. One is he has long sought, and this became part of the campaign, a stronger military. And the idea of peace through strength became a sort of a key issue that he had. So you'll find the U.S., going into these things with a stronger, perhaps a stronger military component. In terms of Ukraine, the question you asked specifically, I think he will probably push negotiations. And the fact that he knows Putin, he will probably put some pressure on Putin to resolve the issue. And in fact, I think he's compelled to do something because of his campaign promises to bring these fights to an end. And in terms of the other big, conflict in the Middle East, and that's the Israel-Hamas situation. I think he will probably try to push for a kind of negotiations as well. And he looks at himself as a superb negotiator. In fact, his book primarily his latest book on business relates to, negotiation and what one can do about negotiation. But I think, when we talk about all this, we have to, this is purely Trump. I think the voters, in a sense, were not all that enthusiastic about his opponent. I mean, she changed her policy dramatically during, the campaign. And I think people were, at least people in my neighborhood, and I stayed up, with a group of people in my neighborhood watching the thing. And that they kept referring to is the fact they didn't really know who she was. In fact, after all, she was put into the position she is as a candidate, really just a few months ago, in a kind of coup d'etat within the Democratic Party, and people, understood that, and and then the charges that Trump was a fascist, Hitler, and that sort of thing, I don't think played well. I think people were interested in issues, and this struck them, I think, as something that was not, very good. But in terms of, foreign affairs, I think he's going to push the issue of negotiations, on both the Ukraine issue as well as the Israel-Hamas issue.
All right. And I'd like to also bring in Mike Baker, who's a foreign policy analyst. He's also a podcaster at President's Daily Brief. Many thanks to you, Mike, for joining in. As far as Donald Trump's prospective outlook on foreign policy, particularly the wars, are concerned, how do you see this now panning out, especially in the Middle East? We've seen how the Jewish American vote has played a very critical role in this election. At the same time, even several Arab Americans, we've seen them endorse Donald Trump at that rally in Michigan some days ago. Will it be as simple for Trump to take a stance as far as the Middle East situation is concerned?
Well, I don't think it's ever simple for anyone, no matter what administration or who we're talking about, to try to resolve the situation in the Middle East. It's obviously ticked on for generations. So it's complicated. That's not a statement of rocket science. But I do believe that based on what we were seeing from the Iranian regime during the course of the campaign season and the work that they were doing on the disinformation side and misinformation, sort of their cyber shenanigans, if you will. It was clear that while you could argue China's efforts in disrupting the election were based on just trying to discredit democracy, you could argue the same about Russia. Iran clearly seemed to be interested in ensuring that Trump wouldn't win. And so I think that what we're going to see is probably a redirection of U.S. policy towards the Iranian regime, because at the end of the day, you're never going to get to mid or long-term peace in the Middle East as long as the Iranian regime and the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, stay with this current position that they have. It's just not going to happen. They've built a terror network around Israel, and it's all in the pursuit of their stated goal, which they have said repeatedly, which is the destruction of Israel. So you have to deal with the top problem. Creating a ceasefire in Gaza, creating a ceasefire with Hezbollah, yes, it stops in the very, very short term the immediate violence, but you're just kicking the can down the road. So I think what we're going to see is more of an emphasis in terms of who is dealing with the Iranian regime of trying to resolve that problem. And so that's a positive, I do believe.
All right. Lisa Curtis, if I could quickly bring you in on the concerns that India has as far as our strategic partnership is concerned. Feel free to take this discussion forward on the wars as well. But as I said, what's different compared to the previous Trump presidency and now is going to be the ongoing wars, India's own strategic concerns that are coming from the rising Khalistan threat, not just in United States, but particularly from Canada, and the stance that has been so far maintained by the Biden administration, which of course has called for an investigation as far as Pannu's death plot is concerned, a murder plot is concerned, and for which New Delhi has only cooperated. But we've not really heard any criticism or condemnation of the Khalistan elements and the way the Hindus in Canada are being persecuted. So that's a concern which perhaps India has.
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, there are a couple challenges to the U.S.-India relationship, and one is the, investigation into the alleged assassination plot against Panun in the United States. I think that investigation will continue by DOJ, but it's being handled in a very professional way. I would say both sides are keeping it out of the public eye. The U.S. has indicated that India is fully cooperating. So I don't expect that to be an issue that is going to, rise up or take over the U.S.-India relationship. I think, it's there, but it will not interfere with the broader strategic trajectory of the relationship. And yes, I think if India comes to a Trump administration with information about, terrorist activity happening on U.S. soil, certainly the Trump administration will take that very seriously and will act. And I would just note that I think
how do you also read? Yeah, sure. Sure, go ahead.
I think there is action that has started, and I think a Trump administration will continue to prosecute those who are responsible for attacking the San Francisco consulate, India's San Francisco consulate, which happened, I think, last year. I think that will move forward, that the U.S. will take action to get the perpetrators of that heinous event.
And how do you read into Donald Trump sending out that Diwali greeting where he's also condemned the mob violence that's taken place against Hindus in Bangladesh? Is this just election rhetoric, or Donald Trump also extending his support to the Hindu community, which finds itself turning extremely vulnerable in certain parts of the world?
Well, look, the Indian American vote is very important in the United States. So, I don't underestimate that factor. 2.6 million Indian American voters, every vote counted in this election. But I think, to sort of look forward at the Bangladesh situation, there is tremendous concern about the instability there and what direction that country is going to go in. There's already been some Islamist extremists released from jail. We've seen problems in the past with terrorist attacks emanating from Bangladesh. So I think there will be concern about the situation there. And The U.S. would be interested in working closely with India to making sure, there is stability in the broader region, that the situation in Bangladesh does not get out of hand, that there can be, a peaceful transition. So yes, I think right now, I'm not sure that Bangladesh is top of mind for President-elect Trump, but certainly when he takes a seat in January, I think his administration will be paying attention closely and ensuring that situation doesn't
Yes.
lead to.
And why not, considering we've seen that happen already during the formation of the interim government. The United States was playing a very crucial role, even though one as an observer. But let me quickly bring in Walter Anderson as well to weigh in on how this is going to pan out for Hindus. And of course, as Lisa Curtis was also highlighting, the critical role that Indian Americans are playing in this election, not just in terms of being a crucial voter, but also the way we've seen them, contribute to U.S. politics. Given all of that, how do you see Donald Trump now standing up for India, for Indians, for concerns as far as security is concerned?
Donald Trump and some people I know who, Indians who have been in touch with him, he gets on well with the Indian American community. The Indian American community, is the latest figure I saw is about 4.5 million altogether, and 2.5, 3 million voters. So that counts in certain areas, and he's well aware of that. It's also a very, wealthy community. In fact, it's the wealthiest of various ethnic communities in the United States. And he receives significant support from them, which is often overlooked. The other thing is, on terms of foreign affairs, how will, he handle India? He was a strong supporter of the Quadrilateral. This is that group of 4 countries, in part, formed, because of the China threat. But, that's an organization that has initially started out purely economic and has gradually shifted to have security, links to it. And as the public statements he's made about it has been very supportive, and that means supportive of India as it looks at potential dangers from China and other areas, threats to the sea lanes of the Indian Ocean. So on that, particularly through the Quad, I think you're going to find a stronger Indian-U.S. relationship. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if he doesn't try to set up some kind of meeting fairly soon with the heads of those 4 countries. Well, hello.
All right. Yes. I think that's a very interesting point that you've made, but I could quickly bring in Mike. Mike, in terms of our defense partnership, how do you see this defense trade now shaping up for India and the United States? Does it also mean transferring of critical emerging technology, something that the Biden administration had in fact focused on specifically? How will the defense partnership now grow under Prime Minister Modi and a prospective president in Donald Trump?
Yeah, I think going into this next administration, in part to answer that question, we'll need to look at who is coming in to staff certain positions within the administration. But in general terms, sure, I do think that the next Trump administration will understand the importance, both on the economic side and, as you pointed out, on the defense side with India. So, look, there's no mistaking it. This is an incredibly important relationship, right? And we have seen in the past that Trump does understand that, as Walter had just pointed out. So I'm not worried about the strength of that relationship. I'm not worried about this Trump administration coming in and not understanding that. I think it will be top of mind, frankly, because again, you look at the threats that we're facing around the world, the U.S. and its allies, and India is standing there to play a key role in all of this. And so there's a lot of angst in the U.S. right now, right? Understandably so. It's the morning after an election that was incredibly emotive. So we have to let the dust settle a little bit and everyone needs to take a breath.
Okay.
But at the end of the
Okay.
day, yeah, I think this relationship between the U.S. and India is going to be very strong.
All right. I'm also joined in by Mr. G. Balachandran, who's a political scientist, also an academician and uncle to Kamala Harris. Mr. Balachandran, thank you so much for joining in. Now, as somebody who's been very closely observing how U.S. elections in the decades gone by have been shaping up, and as a political scientist, how do you weigh in on what not just United States, but the entire world is witnessing in terms of the results that have come out?
You know, this morning when I woke up, I felt like the chairman of Cunard Ship Lines, day after Titanic sank. It's not only it was a personal loss, it was a devastating loss for many people. So I'm rather saddened that Kamala didn't win. But contrary to what your other panelists are saying that India will flourish, I don't think so. I'm worried about it, not only for India-US relations. The US, for good or bad, has great influence on the developments around the world. And Trump is certainly not a positive factor in any international environment. He has no concern for international law. He has no regard for international commerce. He is an idiosyncratic person. In fact, he doesn't like alliances. In fact, please understand, after what he said about NATO and Russia can do what it wants to Ukraine, and told Japan, you and South Korea take care of yourself, I'm not going to worry. And to say that he is going to worry about India-China relations is preposterous. But anyway, we'll have to wait and see. I'm willing to take a wager with any of the panelists around here that India-US relations will suffer in the coming years. But
all right, and since you're talking about India-US relationship suffering, we've seen the amount of restrictions that were placed on the H-1B visas, which became an issue during the Trump presidency. Do you think this could also mean bad news for Indian workforce, especially the one coming out from India's IT sector?
Look, his insistence on tariff as a solution for major problems. And India is one
No, but why not immigration? That's been a massive concern for India under the previous presidency of Donald Trump.
Oh yeah, immigration. Look, the Indians cannot claim like the rest of the world that they've got an automatic right to go to the US and everybody should allow them in. India doesn't allow everybody in. So why should everybody allow Indians to come in and do whatever they want? Yes, it will be a problem.
Well, as long as Americans get cheaper labor, then they don't need immigrants. The problem is for them to be getting cheap labor within the United States.
Look, like economists have been saying, Trump is not. You think the immigrant labor in US is very expensive? They are cheap. But he's more concerned about those things. Yes. And India is one of the very few countries, I think only one of the two countries that have got a trade surplus both in goods and services. Other countries have a lot of surplus in goods but not in services. India has got surplus, so tariff is going to hit India. So I am quite perplexed by all optimists. India and US will flourish. Trump is a great internationalist. He's concerned for international law. But he's got no concern for international law. Now he's going to get out of Iran, which Obama went. He's going to get out of a lot of UN. So let's not talk about us. Trump is a savior. In fact, he's going to be a destructive force.
No, nobody's saying that Trump is a savior. We are weighing in on the foreign policy outlook of that. Mr. Balachandran, I'm going to request you to continue staying with us because you've made a very interesting point as far as trade is concerned, which is why I'd like to quickly bring in Lisa. Lisa, you very closely observed the previous Trump presidency. He's called India the tariff king. He's also talked about, I think he used Harley Davidsons as a very critical example. and he talked about how trade was suffering with India because of the extreme taxes that were being imposed by India, which is why during one of his campaigning sessions in September this year itself, he called India as an abuser of trade. So do you think that the trade partnership is going to be a very tricky domain for India and the United States now under the Donald Trump presidency?
Well, I think that's right. I think the most challenging aspect of the India-U.S. relationship under President Trump will be on trade issues. You mentioned the fact that, he very publicly criticized India for, I think he said 100% tariffs on Harley Davidson motorcycles. He has talked, repeatedly tweeted numerous times about India's tough trade position. And so, he will continue to try to get market access to India, advocate for Indian companies. This will continue. But I think we don't see this as a threat to the India-U.S. relationship. We see this as his sort of hard bargaining position that he, wants to negotiate. He wants to get a good deal for the American people. So he will push on these issues. But, even though he pushed on these issues his last time in the administration, it's not like the trade issues overwhelmed the bilateral relationship. It still was very positive. Unfortunately, they didn't come to a major trade agreement. So, I think it was a difficult issue. But when, Trump is talking about 60% tariffs on Chinese goods coming into the U.S., that's one thing. But I don't think that it's going to impact overall U.S.-India trade in any major way.
Right. Walter Anderson, I think this could also mean a silver lining of sorts for India, especially if we were to compare the trade war that Washington has with Beijing, because that also means shifting away of manufacturing from China coming to India, something that we've already seen happen. It's a work in progress, and it's been happening successfully under the Biden administration. The dependency, especially on manufacturing, on metals, on pharmaceuticals, a lot of that trade dependency that decades ago was on China has now been gradually getting divided in South Asia, and of course India becoming one of those reliable partners as well.
Well, I think that's true. The other aspect of this, beside the purely governmental one, which is, as you mentioned, is the non-governmental links between U.S. and India. That you have more and more U.S. business people connected to India, in one way, including my own wife, who is an Indian, who has business in India. In fact, she has a factory there. And so, she's a little concerned about the tariff issue because that will affect, her product coming to the United States. But, she was very supportive in many ways of President Trump and what he was doing to improve the relationship with India. Because at the end of the day, what really counts in a bilateral relationship like this is how the leadership gets along in terms of working out issues. And there are issues to work out, as Lisa has mentioned. And for what we know is that Trump got along quite well with Prime Minister Modi. And I suspect, that he will find that personal relationship an asset in working out the differences that we may have. And there are differences. We have differences with Canada, and including trade differences. And I think that, on the issues of the differences we have with India, this is a point where negotiations come in. Here again, one should look at his book because he talks about the value of negotiations in working out problems before they become a crisis. And I think, if you follow that, paradigm, he will do that in the case of India and in trade. In some ways, this is a much, less dangerous aspect than the security issues he faces, and that there is a kind of mutual win-win on trade.
All right. Let me, in fact, get in closing thoughts from Mr. Balachandran. Mr. Balachandran, I know the results today have brought you a devastating blow. No, but let me ask you, sir. Sir, please let me ask you this question. The mandate today is not just about the Electoral College. The mandate is also inclusive of the popular vote. What explains such a sweeping mandate for Donald Trump in your point of view? Despite Kamala Harris's door-to-door campaigning, what worked in his favor, something that did not work in Kamala's favor?
Now, let me tell you one thing. Please, don't put my name as Kamala's uncle. I'm an academician like the others. I'm an analyst.
No, which is why I am asking you that question. Yes, I am asking you that question with regards to the fact that you've been observing American election for quite some time.
So put as an observer. Don't put as Kamala's uncle. That's all I'm saying. Now, coming to your question, I'm really now studying. I'm really intrigued as much as by anybody else. Still, the total California votes have not come in. I don't think he will get the majority of the popular vote. I'm willing to stand corrected if somebody disagrees with me. But I am intrigued by two things. One, how is it that the US, which is supposed to be far more average income, intelligence, etc., goes around and voted for Trump in such huge numbers when everybody was worried? I don't know. I'm studying it and I'm studying it further. The MAGA Republicans, nobody has studied here. I have studied them. I'm looking at their philosophy. So I won't be able to contradict why the American public is behaving the way it is. It's almost like a mad crowd. But I wouldn't say that. Let me study that.
It's unfortunate that you must refer to the popular vote as a mad crowd, but I'm sure we'll have to respect the majority, the mandate that the Americans have given today. And I'd like to end this discussion with that. And here's hoping that only good things are slated in the days ahead as far as Donald Trump and this US presidency is concerned, and the way it will now be shaping up the geopolitics of the globe. Many thanks to you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining in on Race for the White House. We'll be back with more elements from Ground Zero. We are reporting to you live from the CNN studios in New York City, and we'll also be getting you all of those live and latest updates from the United States. Stay tuned to Race for the White House as we return after a quick break.